Once I figured out about tradethepool, it just makes a lot more sense, to take on less risk. It's a lot easier to trade someone else's risk, I guess. You minimize your own downside. It's easier to have conviction and feel better about your trades.
Welcome everybody to another funded trader of tradethepool. Today, Jared is with me, a new funded trader of the 25K Flex program. Thanks for coming, Jared.
And hi, of course. Happy to be here.
Nice. Jared, we're going to talk a little bit about your trading performance in general, and also obviously during the process with us at tradethepool. For those of you not familiar, we usually do those interviews for once you get funded. And we actually want to understand how easy to become funded and the full process. So let's dive into that. What are you trading mostly? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've tried a bunch of different things. I kind of started with small cap stocks like a lot of people do a couple of years ago. But eventually I found that once that market died down, I had to actually learn how to trade a lot better and understand price action and setups. And for that, I found that large caps are really the most predictable as far as identifying trends and, more reliable setups. So mainly I've been trading tech stocks, mainly stuff that follow the SPY and the QQQ. I find it useful to have both of those up while trading them. So like NVIDIA, or sometimes I'll trade UPRO or like QQQ to get exposure to the markets without taking as much risk on. I also like trading Amazon, Google, GOG. I've traded AMD a little bit, Apple, mainly tech stocks. Nothing too unfamiliar. I find I get in trouble if I start trading stuff that I'm not familiar with.
It's interesting that you mentioned that it's easier to predict those large cap compared to, let's say, the penny stock, the small cap. And this is something that I hear exactly the opposite when
really
a penny stock trader, because he's saying, there is a classic pump and dump. You just need to wait to the pump to be over and then you short it, right?
Yeah, that works for some people, but I find that that's a little too anxiety inducing for me trading those, because you can really get caught on the wrong side of those.
Yeah, well, definitely that. How long are you trading for?
Since 2019, I started like a lot of people around COVID, but yeah, I've been just practicing and learning ever since then, pretty much.
And are you trading also your personal account, like with a broker?
Yeah, I was until about 6 months to a year ago. I guess once I figured out, about tradethepool, it just makes a lot more sense, to take on less risk and trade. It's a lot easier to trade someone else's risk, I guess. You minimize your own downside. It's easier to have conviction and feel better about your trades.
Amazing. That's a great feedback. Thank you. All right. So talking about your trades, your trading style, right? Are you looking for more of a momentum, reversals, pullbacks?
Yeah. So I mainly like trading breakouts and breakdowns as far as longs and shorts go. I like to see stuff retest VWAP. That's probably the most important indicator I use. I don't really use many indicators because I like having a clean chart, not too much noise. But VWAP I find to be really useful. So I like to see a long retest VWAP and come back up. And I feel a lot better about a breakout on the second attempt once it's already, retested the lows, put in support. And I find that's a good entry is after that pullback. And same with breakdowns. I like to see it come down to the low of the day. And normally, if it's under VWAP, I'll feel good about that short. Nice. And I find that the 5-minute helps a lot, but I also like having the 15-minute and the 4-hour up just to get a better idea of the overall trend and have a better idea of, where I could possibly look to take profits or look to scale out.
So exactly. Are you, because you have those common stocks, right? The one that you're already familiar with, are you using any type of scanner or analysis before that, or are you always just watching them?
I'm usually watching the same handful of stocks. I haven't really gotten too much into using scanners. I find it easier just to trade stuff I'm familiar with, how it moves day in and day out. So like I'll have a second monitor with a couple charts on it, and it's usually the same ones every day as far as like Apple and NVIDIA, AMD, just all the tech stocks basically. But yeah, and like I'll check like the daily charts each morning of each to see how they're looking. I like to see which one is stronger than the others or weaker than the others. So that way, if market sentiment changes, say if Apple's weaker than the market that day and suddenly the market starts turning down, I like to look for that weaker stock to find a short opportunity.
Yeah.
But I find it much easier to trade stuff you're familiar with how they move. Yeah, so you don't get caught off guard nearly as much.
For sure. This is definitely something that I noticed a long time ago. I used to trade many variety of stocks depending on the scanners. And then I guess over time, I just started to focus on, similar to what you said, the Qs, NVIDIA.
That's already so difficult. And you just want to be the best version of you when you're trading. So like, you don't want to be in unfamiliar territory too often or getting uncomfortable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now you mentioned you're doing, breakups, breakdowns. What about in a choppy market, right? What happens in those times when it's ranging?
Yeah, so those are probably the toughest markets for me. Sometimes it's better just to not take a trade if you can't find something, but yeah, for those, I definitely like to temper expectations and try to just get like a point on a scalp or something. Not look for home runs. Just find something that looks like an okay entry. Set your stop loss. Figure all that out ahead of time. But definitely temper expectations if the market's choppy and you don't have a great feeling either way. So it's easy to get chopped up and suddenly you have a pretty big red day on your hands.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's dive into your hub, your dashboard, basically. Okay. For those of you not familiar, every trader gets his own dashboard. I'm going to share it, and let's talk a little bit about that. A few points that are really interesting here, I guess. So this is how it looks like. And basically, like I said, every trader gets his own dashboard. Flex 25K, which is unlimited time to pass the evaluation. You need to reach a certain target, which you did. Max loss, daily pause, etc. Nice, solid chart. You started, pushed higher, a little bit of a pullback, but then reached the target. I guess the number one data that comes up is this one, the 81% success rate.
Yeah, I expect that to definitely come back down, but also have the risk reward to come up a little bit more. Something closer to 1 to 2, maybe not quite there, but I expect the success rate to come back down to somewhere between 40 and 60.
Yeah.
A little high.
81%, it's a lot. Why do you think you reached that 81% success rate? What was different than the other times?
Okay, so I think I had a pretty good read on what the market was going to do. On the day that a lot of that profit came from, I don't know if you remember, but it was the day that basically the headline that came out was a pause on tariffs. And I had been watching the market for a while prior to that, and you could tell the market really wanted a reason to squeeze and push higher. But every time it would try, a negative headline would come out or tweet or something would scare the market. So once this news came out, I really felt good that the market was going to squeeze and continue to squeeze for the rest of that day. So I felt very comfortable holding my long longer than I normally would for, say, SPY or, basically I traded UPRO, I think, that day, which is a smaller, more like a 1.5x version of the S&P 500. But yeah, I felt very comfortable about longs that afternoon and just let them go.
Nice. And I mean, you did pass in one day, right? You started at the
technically too, but yeah.
So that's also amazing. But this is something that I guess related to also the previous attempts that you had, right? Because you did a few attempts before that. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, a lot of the guys obviously are trying, and I've been saying that through the interviews many times. You need like 2-3 times until you pass the evaluation, right? And tell me a little bit about your experience here.
Yeah, so I have ADHD, which I just found out about a year ago, which makes it even harder to trade. So you're not just battling yourself, but also the market. So it took a lot of trial and error for me to figure out what works for me, what stocks to trade, to get my sizing appropriate, and just to like lock in and really take it seriously. And I think a lot of it was figuring out what size account worked best for me, what kind of sizing I needed, what size stop loss worked best for me for a day. Like I tried the smaller accounts, I tried the larger accounts. You just have to find what works best for you and your risk tolerance. I noticed with the smaller accounts, I found myself pushing those a bit because you can only take so much size and only trade certain tickers with those. So I think 25K is the sweet spot for that.
Nice. I mean, you did great on this one, no doubt about it. Great move. And you already, of course, have your funded account. You already trading with it. So that's a great move. Before we'll finish here, I want to ask you two things. One, what do you think about the market? Where we heading?
This is a very difficult market to trade. I've been kind of sideways, honestly, most of this year since this new U.S. presidential administration started, just because the market is so ready it's sensitive to move on headlines. So you have to basically have alerts ready right to your phone or your desktop for any news that comes through, because any negative or positive tariff news or trade war news or anything just changes sentiment on a dime. So you have to be really ready to change, direction and bias. You can't get too hung up one way or the other. And it's hard to swing anything. That's why I kind of like the day trading, because it's too hard to carry risk overnight because the market just moves on these headlines. So it's easier to, trade smaller size, more manageable positions. And you just have to be aware, things could change.
For sure. So is it up or down for you? Like for the long term, let's say 3 months?
It's hard to say. It could go either way, honestly. I feel like it's rather choppy right now. I do feel like the market wants to move higher, but I don't expect us to head to all-time highs anytime soon. I feel like we're more likely to pull back further by that point, but you'll probably see a couple nice bear rallies in there.
For sure.
We'll be looking at the daily charts to figure out how far they'll push these relief balances and, the next level that they'll send things down. I think you really need to see this tariff stuff get solved and put away before the market is going to feel comfortable pushing higher.
Yeah, I guess so. And I'm totally with you on this one. How is it like to pass the evaluation, especially after a few attempts?
It's definitely a big weight off your shoulder. You feel like, it helps a lot of traders have their self-worth tied up in their trading. So it helps a lot to have something to show for your hard work and just grinding and learning and, all that screen time. It definitely is rewarding. And, it feels pretty good to finally, be able to say, hey, I did this. Here's proof that, I'm a profitable trader. I passed this. It's just a weight off your shoulders.
Yeah, for sure. All of us have been working so hard to accomplish something, right? To reach that point where we can say, I know what I'm doing. And this is definitely one of those moments when you get this achievement. So speaking of achievement, of course, you have under this tab of achievements, you can definitely share your certificate with the other guys through our Discord or other platforms. Alrighty, Jared, thanks so much for the interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And for those of you who want to check us out, go to tradethepool.com and we'll be in touch. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.